Shadowing with Shaynna, genetically modified food. Genetically modified foods are at the center of one of the biggest ongoing debates. There's been a lot of recent discussion about how they should be classified and labeled. And most importantly, whether they are dangerous for humans or animals to eat. What are GMOs exactly? How common are they? Why are they so controversial? GMO stands for genetically modified organism. These foods are usually grains or produce, such as wheat, soybeans, corn, and other common crops. Scientists add genes to these plants in order to increase their resistance to insects or diseases. Currently, about 90% of canola, corn, beets, and soybeans grown in the U.S. are genetically modified, containing at least some DNA from a lab. So it's likely that most people in the U.S. have consumed GMOs. At some point in their lives. There are two sides to this issue. The people who believe that GMOs are dangerous, and the people who say they aren't. Supporters of GMOs point out that they make crops cheaper and safer to grow. GMOs could help increase the food supply and feed the millions of poor people who suffer from malnutrition. Opponents to GMOs question their safety. They point to studies suggesting that GMOs could have health risks, such as greater risks of cancer, allergies, and birth defects. All of these studies, however, rely on animal testing, which isn't always directly applicable to human physiology. There is a general scientific consensus that GMOs are no riskier than conventional food, and there are no confirmed reports of human illnesses caused by GMOs. The European Union requires food with GMOs to be marked as such on its packaging. This is not the case in the United States. As a precaution, some European countries have completely prohibited importing genetically modified foods. A number of people have concerns about the long-term effects of consuming GMOs. But it's hard to draw any conclusions yet. Since they're still a relatively new part of the modern diet. Many of the more extreme possibilities such as a connection between GMOs and cancer have been dismissed. Although cancer is one of the leading causes of death in the United States, the majority of common cancer diagnoses such as breast cancer, prostate cancer, skin cancer, and lung cancer have no proven link to GMOs. Humans have actually been doing a slow form of genetic modification ever since the development of agriculture. Farmers would select plants with specific attributes that they wanted. For example, apple trees with the sweetest apples, and breed those in order to produce future generations of crops with the desired trait. Today's genetic modification simply speeds up the process by tweaking the plant's DNA in a laboratory. Another possible point of concern is the effect of GMOs on the natural environment. How will they change the biodiversity? In the areas where they are cultivated? More study is necessary to find out whether GMOs are harmful or harmless to the earth. It's hard to say conclusively if genetically modified food is totally safe. Does it warrant further testing? Certainly. Does it mean we should steer clear of GMOs? In the meantime? Well, each of us has to draw our own conclusions. Shadowing with Shaynna. What does your body language say about you? Many experts say that more than half of communication is nonverbal. We communicate through our body language. Eye contact and facial expressions. The way that you hold yourself influences the way that other people see you. When you use body language properly, it can help you not only feel better about yourself, but also be happier and more successful. When you're interviewing for a job, going on a first date, or meeting someone important, body language is crucial to the first impression. We might not be aware of it, but we all interpret other people's body language constantly. As we interact with them. In order to make the type of impression that you want and improve your social life, it's a good idea to understand what your body language is saying about you. Before you start working on yourself, take some time to observe other people in your daily life. Notice their posture and the way they move. Are they standing up tall? Or do they slouch? Do they have their arms folded? Or are they using their hands expressively? Do they appear to be comfortable in their own skin? Or are they awkward and self-conscious? All of these little things combine to give off a certain vibe. If you have an embarrassed look on your face, stay very still, or change your posture to make yourself seem smaller, This sends the message that you are not confident. Some of the most common examples are standing with your ankles crossed, letting your shoulders slump, avoiding eye contact, and keeping your face pointed downwards. If you tend to do these things, you'll often be perceived as weak and not very sure of yourself. Even if you feel nervous inside, try to avoid the telltale signs of anxiety, like fidgeting or constantly looking away from the person you're talking to. Don't lick your lips frequently. Play with your hair or with an object in your hands, or tap your foot. Not only do these habits make it obvious that you're nervous, but some people may interpret them as signs that you're lying. On the other hand, people who are confident often don't have to say a word. Others can tell right away. Confident people stand up straight and look everyone in the eye, approaching someone first to offer a handshake is another good way to show that you are socially poised and in control. Some people naturally have this type of body language, and others have to practice and learn it. You can practice in front of the mirror before you walk out the door. When you are at the store, or when talking with friends or coworkers. Remind yourself to keep your spine straight and your head up so that you are looking at people and not at the floor. Making eye contact and smiling genuinely is also important. Don't leave your arms hanging stiffly at your sides. Instead, make a few natural gestures with your hands, although there's no need to overdo it. Another trick is to think about someone you know, whose confidence you admire, and pretend you are that person. Changing your body language isn't easy, but it's definitely possible. Believe it or not, consciously changing your physical demeanor can actually result in feeling more confident inside. When your confidence levels go up, other people will notice and be drawn to you. You'll probably experience more success at work and in social situations, as well as in your love life. Shadowing with Shaynna, 3 surprisingly advanced ancient cultures. When people think about the distant past, they often believe that ancient civilizations were primitive and backward. You might be surprised to find out that this view is sorely mistaken. Some of the world's ancient cultures were very sophisticated, and a number of them made great contributions to the development of modern society. Today you'll learn about 3 societies that were quite advanced. Even though they existed hundreds or thousands of years before us. Ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians represented one of the most impressive cultures in human history. The pyramids are a testimony to their brilliant engineers and architects. And they also came up with some incredible inventions. Long before paper was first made in China, the Egyptians created papyrus, a thick paper-like material made from a plant. The Egyptians were very secretive about the process used to manufacture papyrus, since they wanted to use the sheets as currency for trading. They created their own calendar, which helped them know when the Nile River was prone to flooding so they could plant and harvest crops, at the right time. Speaking of agriculture, evidence shows that the Egyptians were one of the first cultures to use the plow, around 4000 BC. Here's a random fact. Egyptians made the first breath mints by using cinnamon, myrrh, and frankincense. They would boil the ingredients with honey and then make them into small balls or pellets. A few of their other inventions include toothpaste, an ancient form of bowling, and locks on doors. Ancient Maya. The Egyptians had a calendar, but the Maya also attempted to keep a historical record, beginning at what they believe to be their origin. These early calendars and records were carved into massive stone monuments. And they showed that the Maya had a very firm grasp of astronomy and math. They produced the oldest surviving book written in the Americas, a 78-page document that's probably from the 11th or 12th century. Their writing system is difficult to decipher, but so far historians have determined that the text contains accurate descriptions of the movements of the moon and the planet Venus. The Mayan culture was also medically advanced for the time. They were able to suture wounds and fix broken bones. In addition, they had dental prosthetics. And were even able to fill cavities. The study of medicinal plants was very important to the Maya, and they kept detailed records of how various illnesses responded to treatment with herbal remedies. Indus Valley Civilization. These people lived between 4,000 and 5,000 years ago. In what is now India and Pakistan. Many of them were traders and artisans. And they were among the first to develop a system of uniform weights and measurements. But what really makes them stand out is their incredible knowledge of urban planning. Archaeologists have discovered more than 1,000 cities and settlements in the region. Some of them are designed so efficiently that they may have been completely planned out. Before being built. Their water supply and sewage systems were more advanced than those of other ancient cultures. In fact, the drainage systems of these cities are even better than the infrastructure in certain parts of India and Pakistan today. Shadowing with Shaynna. How popular magic tricks are done. Magicians and magic tricks have been around for ages. Some people love the mystery of not understanding how a trick is done, while others enjoy the challenge of trying to figure it out for themselves. Here are 5 popular magic tricks explained. Levitation. This is a magic trick that is often done by street magicians. The magician appears to rise up off the ground. And if you're watching, it can be hard to figure out how he does it. One of the magician's shoes is specially made so that the foot can be removed, but the shoe will still hang under the pants as if a foot was inside it. The magician carefully takes out his foot and steps up onto a higher surface in front of him. Which brings up his pants, as well as his empty shoe. For this trick to work, the audience has to be positioned directly behind the magician so that they don't see his supporting foot outside the shoe, shot by a gun. This shocking trick has been popular for the past 100 years. The magician puts a gun behind a pane of glass. The gun fires, the glass shatters, and the magician stands alive and well. With the bullet between his teeth. Originally, the magicians used wax bullets. That would destroy the glass, but go no farther. Now they have special types of guns that can make a loud noise and break the glass, but not actually fire a bullet. The magician hides a real bullet in his mouth, which he then reveals at the end of the trick. Sometimes, to complicate matters, the magician asks a volunteer from the audience to write their initials on the bullet that goes into the gun. In order to prove it's the same bullet that ends up in the magician's mouth. In this case, an assistant watches and copies the same initials onto an identical bullet, which he slips to the magician while the audience is distracted. Sawed in half. A magician places a woman in a box. And you can see both her head and her legs. Sticking out at the ends. The magician saws the box in two, separates both halves, then puts them back together. And the woman emerges whole. The box has two separate compartments. One woman, who acts as the head, folds her legs underneath the rest of her body. The other woman is already concealed in the box and reveals her legs while hiding her head and torso. A more dramatic variation of this trick involves seeing a buzzsaw apparently separate two halves of a person who is not in a box. For this trick, there are still two very flexible people on the table. The other halves of their bodies are hidden inside compartments in the table. And the buzzsaw cuts through a steel band in the middle that is supposedly being used to hold the victim down. Vanishing elephant. Harry Houdini is most famous for his escapes from seemingly impossible traps. But his disappearing elephant trick was also sensational. During the show, the elephant went into a large box on stage. And the doors were closed. The box had wheels that lifted it off the floor. So it was clear that the elephant couldn't go down a trapdoor. When the doors were opened again, the elephant was gone. For many years, nobody knew the secret to this trick. The most probable explanation is that the elephant was hidden behind a diagonally placed mirror in the back of the box. So when the doors were opened, the mirror reflected one of the side walls, making the box look empty. Shadowing with Shaynna, virtual reality. Virtual reality, along with flying cars, teleportation, and food replicators, is one of the main things that people think about when they're talking about futuristic gadgets. Unlike any of the others, however, virtual reality technology has made some serious steps forward. In the past few years, while it hasn't gotten to the levels described in sci-fi novels, we're much closer to functional virtual reality than we are to teleportation. How is this technology already being used? And what are the possibilities for its future development? Virtual reality is a lot more common than you might imagine. Technically, anything that simulates our world or one like it is virtual reality. This can include everything from a video game to a computerized model used to test aerodynamics. Most of today's virtual reality systems have standard input devices, mouse and keyboard, video game controller, touchscreen, etc. And the output is usually on a two-dimensional screen. But this is changing. Some video game systems now have motion detectors, so your movements affect what's happening in the game. There is a new product coming out in 2016 that's called the Oculus Rift. It's a headset that covers your eyes and completely immerses you in a virtual universe. It will make you feel like you're really walking and looking around an actual place. All of these technologies are for video games, but games are only a small part of what VR can be used for. The biggest practical application of virtual reality is in the field of education and training. It's helpful for anyone who needs to develop the ability to do dangerous work. For example, many surgeons now practice in simulations of operations so they can hone their skills before operating on a real patient. Pilots also use virtual reality to learn how to fly planes. And this type of training is now being expanded to help novice truck drivers as well. The military makes heavy use of VR. Testing the recruits in various kinds of combat situations, so they can learn in a controlled environment. Engineers use virtual simulations for experimenting on design concepts. That would take a lot of time and money. To build in the real world. VR is even used in therapy. To treat people with phobias and post-traumatic stress disorder. The patient can gradually encounter the things that would normally cause them to panic and learn to control their reactions. The initial results indicate that this method is very effective. The main challenge in the development of VR involves motion sickness. Since the computer-generated images might not perfectly match our body's natural senses of perception and balance, it's easy to become disoriented. Some authors have expressed concern that if virtual reality becomes accessible to the general population, people might get addicted to it. Others have a more optimistic view, predicting that VR will integrate seamlessly into daily life and activity. True virtual reality, plugging your brain into a computer, is still far off. But we're making progress. The devices we have now would be practically unimaginable to our grandparents when they were our age, Shadowing with Shaynna, Daily Life 100 Years Ago. Have you ever stopped to think about how your life might be different if you'd been born 100 years ago? We don't have access to a time machine, but we can imagine what things were like based on data and documents from the past. A lot of things that are easy today were much harder and more time-consuming in the past. This glimpse back at life in the early 1900s will help you appreciate the comforts and conveniences we have today. Transportation. Nowadays, if you want to travel, you can buy a plane ticket, head to the airport, and be on the opposite side of the country or of the world within a day. But 100 years ago, the best way to travel across the United States was by train. If you wanted to go overseas, you would have to book passage on a ship, and the journey would take quite a while. Even traveling around town required patience. People were still using the horse and buggy, since few people had cars. Most of the roads were unpaved, and the speed limit was just 10 to 12 miles per hour. Hygiene and health. We're so used to having indoor plumbing that we don't give it a second thought. But running water would have been a luxury. At the turn of the century, most homes had outhouses. People usually bathed once a week, and women washed their hair only once a month. Only the wealthy could afford to change their clothes every day. We take it for granted that our life expectancy is now in the high 70s. For people who are relatively healthy. In 1915, the life expectancy was much shorter. Men lived an average of 53 years, and women 57. The leading causes of death were diseases that are easily treatable or preventable today, such as pneumonia, tuberculosis, and diarrhea. More than 95% of babies were born at home, and 90% of doctors had no college education. Communication. Today we can get in touch with people instantly, with a phone call, email, or text message. 100 years ago, You would have to send a letter or a telegram and wait for a response. Only 8% of American households had a telephone. Work and money. Eggs were 34 cents a dozen, and milk cost 35 cents per gallon. You could buy coffee for 30 cents a pound. And a 10-pound bag of potatoes would cost 15 cents. The average price of a house was $3,200. But keep in mind that the typical worker only made about $400 a year. Your career options were limited by your social class, and especially by your gender. Most professions were closed to women. Entertainment. Today we have tons of choices for entertainment. From the internet to a practically infinite number of TV channels. In the early 20th century, television hadn't been invented yet. Plus, many homes didn't have electricity. Movies were available in theaters, but they were still rare. People had to learn to amuse themselves. They'd read, socialize, and spend time outside. As you can see, our daily lives are quite different today. Some people romanticize the past as a better and simpler time. But there are not too many who would actually want to trade places with someone living 100 years ago. Shadowing with Shaynna. Common beliefs that aren't true. People tend to be pretty sure about the things they know. But it's always a good idea to double-check your facts. Sometimes a fact gets repeated so often that it comes to be accepted as truth. Number 1. No swimming after eating. Almost everybody says it's dangerous to swim right after eating. You probably heard this advice not only from your parents, but also from swimming teachers and lifeguards. The theory is that you can get cramps when you swim after a meal, and you'll be more likely to drown. However, our bodies are perfectly capable of swimming and digesting at the same time. The one thing that does increase the risk of drowning is drinking alcohol before you go swimming, for obvious reasons. Number 2, we only use 10% of our brains. A lot of people marvel at the belief that we use only 10% of our brains. It's an interesting idea, because if we use just 10% of our mental capabilities, that means there's another 90% that we could learn to use. Unfortunately, this idea has absolutely no basis in fact. Using data from MRI scans, researchers are able to tell us exactly what part of the brain is being used for different tasks. The truth is that large portions of our brains are active almost all the time. Over the course of a normal day, you'll use 100% of your brain at one point or another. Number 3, bulls hate the color red. If you've ever witnessed a bullfight, you've watched the bull charge after a waving red cape. Since the cape is always red, most people assume that the color red angers the bull. This is another myth. In fact, bulls are colorblind to red. So you might wonder, if they aren't reacting to the color, then why do they charge? Bulls charge when they feel threatened. The color doesn't matter to them. Bulls are just as likely to charge a green, blue, or white cape as a red one. Number 4. Cold weather causes colds. Your mother or grandmother might have told you to put on warmer clothing in the winter, or else you'd get sick. It's true that more people catch colds in wintertime, but it's not caused by exposure to low temperatures. The common cold is caused by a virus, which is transmitted from person to person. During the winter, we tend to spend more time indoors and in close quarters, meaning that it's easier for viruses to spread. Your best bet for staying healthy is to wash your hands regularly and avoid contact with anyone who's sniffling and sneezing. Number 5. Washing chicken before you cook it. Raw chicken can contain dangerous bacteria, and a lot of people think that washing it will help get the germs off. This is not only false, but it's actually more dangerous. When you wash raw chicken, it increases the likelihood of contaminating your sink, countertop, utensils, and other foods being prepared in the area. Instead of giving your chicken a bath, just cook it to the proper temperature. This will kill all the bacteria. Pay attention to the cooking times recommended in the recipe, or use a meat thermometer to be sure that your chicken is safe. Shadowing with Shaynna. Protect yourself from cybercrime. We're pretty dependent on technology these days, not only for communication, but also for financial transactions. A lot of us do our shopping and banking online. This is very convenient, but it means we're more vulnerable to cybercrime. The good news is that you can protect yourself by taking a few simple precautions. One of the most common cybercrimes out there is called phishing. The victim receives an official-looking email that seems like it comes from a legitimate source, like a bank, a store, or a government institution. The subject line of the email will try to scare you. For example, it might say that there's a problem with your account, or that they need to confirm some details, or else you'll lose your account. The email contains links that appear to go to a website where you can sort things out. But instead of going to the real bank's or company's website, the links lead to an imitation website. It might even have a deceptively similar address. If you don't notice you're on a fake site, you would fill in sensitive information, like your credit card number or password. And when you do, the data is sent to the bad guys. If you get a message that something's wrong with your bank account, the best thing to do is to open a new window and go directly to your bank's website. Type the address yourself. You can also call the bank or visit personally to find out if there's really an issue. This simple step will prevent your personal information from being stolen. Another way that cybercrime can affect you is if your computer gets a virus or malware, that's malicious software. Some viruses can erase your files or make your computer run slowly. Others track your typing so they can discover your passwords. You can keep your computer virus-free by using a bit of common sense. Never install programs from websites that look like they weren't made by legitimate companies. Don't download email attachments from senders you don't know. If a friend sends you a message that seems out of character, It's possible that their computer may have been hacked. Finally, install antivirus software that can monitor and protect your computer. A more subtle form of cybercrime is called social engineering. The criminals do research on you. By using the information you've posted online. They want to find details like your birthday, where you were born, anniversary date, spouses or children's names, etc. They can then use this to steal your identity, such as by calling your bank, pretending to be you, and claiming to have lost the password for your online account. To prevent this, set your social media profiles to private. Only accept friend requests from people you know. And try to minimize the amount of personal stuff you share online. You don't have to be paranoid about cybercrime. But it's best to be aware so you can avoid becoming a victim. If something seems fishy, listen to your instincts. It's better to be safe than sorry. Shadowing with Shaynna: How to deal with conflict. Does this scenario sound familiar? Your neighbor makes a comment that rubs you the wrong way. You feel insulted, so you give him a nasty reply. Then you end up arguing, and now neither of you like each other very much. Could this problem have been averted? And after you've had a falling out, is there a way to mend the relationship? In the heat of the moment, we can lose the ability to think clearly. Arguments and fights set off our fight or flight response, often making us attack the other person. In order to defend ourselves. Later, after we've calmed down, we realize that we could have handled the situation better. The first tip for dealing with conflicts is to stop yourself from saying, the first thing that pops into your mind. Instead of being quick to argue, your side of the issue, take a moment to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Next time someone verbally attacks you, try to respond by acknowledging their point of view. Here's how it might happen. Imagine your neighbor says, "I'm sick and tired of your stupid dog making a mess on my lawn." Your first instinct would be to get defensive and angry. Plus, you might be convinced that it wasn't actually your dog that made the mess. But instead of getting offended or accusing your neighbor of lying, what if you responded like this? "I can understand why you're upset. If I were you, I'd feel the same way." This reply helps diffuse the situation. Why? Because your neighbor feels like he's been heard, and you've positioned yourself as an ally in solving the problem, instead of as an adversary. Your neighbor might even apologize for his comment. And now you can talk everything over calmly and rationally. What if this doesn't work? Let's say that despite your efforts to be sympathetic, your neighbor keeps yelling, cursing, or saying nasty things to you. The next step is to inform him that you are willing to discuss the problem, but not when he's screaming at you. Then you have to walk away. This shows that you want to find a solution, but it has to be when he can talk about it without losing his temper. Always argue respectfully. Swearing and insulting the other person drastically reduces the chances of resolving the conflict in a fair way. Also, this can result in hurt feelings. That may linger even long after the current situation. Imagine if the neighbor had said, Excuse me, but I think your dog is destroying my lawn, and I'm pretty upset about it. The tone of the conversation would have been much nicer. Remember, arguments are about finding out who is right. Discussions are about finding out what is right. Always try to keep your cool and steer the interaction towards a discussion, not an argument. If you can't work things out between you, ask for advice from a neutral third party. Finally, if you are in the wrong, a heartfelt apology will go a long way in making things right. Swallow your pride. Ask for forgiveness and offer to make it up to the other person.